with your family. You can buy a finished 4-bedroom story with 5-year flexible payment plan or a service plot with 2-year payment plan option. With over 300 homes, you will enjoy big tar roads with covered drainage, modern electrification with solar street lights, gated entrance with security post, and a breath-catching experience of our beautiful sea view and lake view. You can own a home today at our Sanyang Sea View Estate. Call us today on 446-4838 or 325-9220. Visit our website on ejinvestments.net. EJ Investments, first in property.
Hello and welcome to the Brunch once again. It's good to be back, and I am Rachel, introducing of course our usual panel, Mr. Lamecham, Nima Kamara, and Mr. Stefan Gabo. But just like last week, today we will start with our special guest. And today we have a very special someone in the name of Mr. Ousman Gajigo. He's a development economist. He has worked with Columbia University, World Bank, United Nations and African Development Bank. He's also an international consultant. He will be discussing with us the various areas of the economy. Welcome to the show, Mr. Gajigo.
Thank you.
First, let's start by the state of our economy, the Gambian economy. Because I know economists like to use technical terms a lot to confuse the layman out there. But what is the state of our economy right now?
Well, I don't know whether we use these technical terms to confuse. That's not really the goal. Sometimes it's just an issue of limitations of vocabulary. You are forced to use certain terms that probably do not have equivalents in the regular vocabulary. That being said, the Gambian economy is, well, it's good that we are recovering. If you look at all economic indicators, whether it's agricultural productivity, foreign direct investment, GDP growth rate, in the last few years of the Jammeh regimes, they were all headed in the wrong direction. So currently, we are in a recovery phase. We've been lucky, at least the rainy season right after the transition, the new government came into power has been good. So the agricultural sector is doing all right. Tourism has recovered. These are the two main drivers of the macroeconomy of the Gambian economy. If you look at the Gambian economy over the course of many decades, the two main factors that drive its fluctuations are rainfall levels, which determine agriculture, and tourism arrivals, which determine how well the tourism sector does. Luckily for us, with the new democracy, tourists are coming back. Agricultural sector so far hasn't suffered any droughts or any natural disasters. To add to that also is that the last few years of the Jammeh regime, we have had foreign direct investment, going significantly down because of all of the negative effects of the government's policies, including expropriation, taking over assets by foreign investors. Also, a lot of our development partners has ceased cooperating and funding our activities. So these last couple of years, in particular the EU, which had suspended and actually stopped disbursing any funds, they have resumed their donors, their support. So a significant amount of resources are coming into the economy that previously had not been available. So for all those factors, even if you have our current president sleeping at the wheels, things would actually recover just through those natural processes. So, but to be clear, there's nothing remarkable going on in the economy in terms of strong growth, in terms of anything specifically this government has done. Just the simple fact that tourists are coming, there hasn't been a drought, and the fact that budget support, which had previously been held, that has been released. Those facts alone are what is really driving the economy, not through any active policies by the current government.
So in other words, we are by ourselves, the economy by natural causes, it's itself recovering, not by any policy action of the government.
How sustainable is that if we don't have our own efforts?
Well, let me give an example. When the Ebola outbreak happened in Sierra Leone and Liberia, those countries, if you look what it did was it really hit the economy very hard. Just having that problem stopped by itself, naturally the economy would recover. Previous economic activities that were not taking place would naturally recover, because there is some natural state of activities that, barring any sustained and active effort to suppress them, they would actually, people will go about their business, make a living. That very simple act by itself would cause economies to grow. Now, whenever an economy is coming out of a crisis period, there is a phase that is called a catch-up phase. Without any activity or any specific policy implementations by the government, the economy would look as if it is really growing fast. But what you have to say, after that transition phase, after that catch-up phase, then the economy then is when you notice, it's when you can tell whether the economy is really growing. So right now what we are doing, we're just going back to our previous level. So looking at the growth rate, if somebody just tells you our economic, as the minister said a few years, 6%, that means under normal circumstances, that is impressive. Any economy that grows at a rate of 6% is actually impressive, even for a developing country. But 6% 2 years down the line would be impressive after recovering from the last few years of the Jammeh regime. So right now, our current growth rate is nothing to start singing about or dancing about.
So in other words, we're troubleshooting back to, like, we're going back to where we were. Well, is that the point?
In a way, we are coming back to where we were. It's only after we've reached our previous level in terms of GDP. Yeah. For instance, let me give another example. In the last year of the Jammeh regime and the fourth year of the Barrow regime, our debt to GDP ratio was over 100%. Yeah. Now it's already, it has gone down, like to,
88%.
Yeah, something like less than 100% significantly. That's not because of, something miraculous that happened or our debt just got, forgiven. No, what happened was that the denominator, GDP, the contraction is reversing and now it's actually growing. So just by the very process of the economy now allowing, removing the constraints, you have the situation of the debt looking like it's becoming sustainable. It's still not sustainable, as the recent IMF mission made quite clear. We are still in a category of a debt distress state. And the composition of our debt makes it difficult to really, even if the foreign debtors were to write off our debt, we still have a component of our debt that is from commercial banks internationally and domestically. So you cannot write off domestic debt. No. You cannot write off debt from the indexing bank because they are a commercial bank. You can write off some debt from a bilateral donor or from a multilateral agency like the World Bank, but the best you can hope for is maybe some sort of forbearance from your other creditors. So basically, just to answer your question, yes, it's a good sign. The GDP growth is 6%. It's always a good sign when you are going up instead of down. But let's put it in perspective. It's nothing to really start celebrating. It's nothing to start thanking this government for putting in place marvelous policies or programs or projects. In fact, there's a lot more they can do than they are not doing right now.
So the question I have is, we can agree that what is sustaining the growth currently are external factors. They are nothing to be credited to the government as to what they are doing currently. But there are also in reverse things that they are doing that can hurt the economy. For example, the unsustainable expenditure that is taking place right now, the fact that no domestic resource generation is happening, the fact that inflation is not being managed to a point where we can boost off growth in the future. In few years down the line, where do you see the consequences coming as a result of all of these activities taking place?
Now, you touched on very important facts. I mean, just a small thing. Yeah. So a lot of the facts are external to the government, but not to the economy. But yes, the issue about managing expenditures is very important. And this is something I have written about, that the government is not doing a lot of things it actually can do about. For instance, if you look at the size of our budget, which is somewhere around not more than $300 million, it's not high relative to what our size of our GDP is by any standard. What is a problem so far is the sort of expenditures which are prioritized in our budget, in our expenditures. Let's go to another specific example. Recently, the government increased public salaries by 50%. By any measure, that is something good. By increasing pay, which is something, the real growth rate of the pay of our public sector has been almost negative. It has been stuck at some level for quite a bit of time. So you cannot have a motivated workforce, especially in the public sector, when they are underpaid. It leads to all sorts of problems, corruption, because people have to feed their families. They will do whatever it takes. The issue we have is the composition is not so much that our expenditure is too high, it's that the composition is basically in the wrong way. There are areas where the government should spend a lot of resources on, it is underspending, and there are areas where it should spend fewer resources on, and it is overspending.
Such as?
Such as, good question. So such as, one, take the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is one of the biggest,
Spenders.
Yeah, I mean, the government spends a lot more money, over $1 billion annually. And this problem has been identified a long time by many partners of the government, that for a country of your size, you need to have certain priorities. Having embassies in so many countries, in some far-flung countries, serve no strategic or development purpose for this country. We have embassies in Russia. We're starting to open one in Sri Lanka very soon. Cuba, Venezuela. We have an embassy in Washington, D.C. and a UN mission in New York. A small country like ours, we need to be a bit more sensible. Have one mission in the U.S. that takes care of both the embassy role and the UN role. Okay. You have several embassies in Western Europe when you probably just need one. Yeah. So if you look, and people don't know this, embassies are costly. Let me give an idea. If a Gambian embassy staff in Dakar, for instance, the government has to pay not only their salary, but their housing. But what people don't know is, where would the kids of the embassy staff go to school? They'll go to the American school. Do you know what is the cost of the American school? It's $20,000 per year, per child.
And we are paying that?
The government pays for that.
For any staff member?
For any staff member. If you are in Saudi Arabia, they go to the American school. If you, the cost of the American school in Abidjan or any African countries is usually about $20,000. So if someone has 4 kids, you're talking about $100,000 for that family, just for education benefit.
My God.
Yeah. And the government pays for it 100%. Even other institutions like African Development Bank, they pay something like 80% of the cost of your education. So having an embassy is very expensive. So we have too many embassies that we do not need. We have our Minister of Foreign Affairs going around as if his goal is to have maximizing the number of Gambian embassies in the world. What is the benefit to the Gambian economy for having an embassy in Russia or an embassy in Malaysia or Indonesia?
Interesting thing is that we don't even have those embassies in our country.
Exactly. Even if we have them here, to what extent, to what goal? So you have that. And there are a lot of other details people don't know. Do you know that the SIS, the formerly NIA, and the military, they have military and intelligence attaches in these embassies? Yes. We have military attaches in China and Russia. Why do we need a military and army officer or an intelligence officer in these embassies? Yeah. In Jammeh's time, they were playing one role only, to be Jammeh's eyes and ears to spy on workers. Why are we allowing?
We are independent and free.
Exactly. So you have that problem. You have a Ministry of Foreign Affairs that is far higher than it needs to be. When we have essential sectors like agriculture, health, education, infrastructure that could use a big chunk of that. We also have other issues like the military. We have a military today that is too large. There has been no reform. The military is the same size as it was during the Jammeh regime, over 5,000 soldiers. The annual budget for the military is over $700 million.
Food alone is 48 million.
Yeah, well, I heard the PRO saying that the government is spending 48 million on food, and therefore if they go...
The PRO was very critical actually of your recent analysis.
I know, I'll get to that. But the point I'm trying to make that if the government if they are really truly concerned about the cost, why stop at the food? Why not look at the whole budget? If we have 5,000 soldiers, they don't have anything to do, and the government is thinking of putting a whole battalion in commercial agriculture. Isn't that telling us the real reason is that the army is too bloated, that they should actually be cut to size or be abolished completely?
But I think that has been even the objective of the security reform, is to cut the size of the army.
Well, what has happened in the security reform? So currently, let's look at the military, what they are doing, and compare it and see if there is any reform going. We have the military is as big as it was. There is a freeze, but there's a freeze on hiring not only for the army, for the military, for budget reasons. The military hasn't cut back. People who were accused, high-ranking officials who were being named in TRRC still continue to serve. We have the army still manning checkpoints, the same number of checkpoints that was on the Jammeh's regime. They are all over the country. We're spending this even more money right now than we were previously spending. What reform are they talking about? So in terms of expenditure, going back to our main point, in terms of government resources, whether they are properly prioritized and allocated to the best possible usage.
So these two
examples, to me, are the glaring ones. That if you were to, properly prioritize our expenditures based on the needs of the country, you would have, you can maintain the same level of budget, but your investments would have higher return, and then you wouldn't really be complaining about the money that whether the army is spending, whether we are spending 48 million in the army.
Should this include also the allocations to the president's office? The office of the
so what do you think is
in
responsible for this on the part of the government?
But also the wage bill.
Were they looking for? Were they just going on an employment spree to get their people on jobs, or afraid of the army, perhaps the security implications,
I don't know. I haven't worked in the government. I don't have.
But you have politicians.
Yes.
Or supporters of political parties who have been posted to be diplomats all over.
Exactly.
Is that not looking just to get employment for people and not necessarily looking at
the
country's interest?
In a way, that is true. I mean, like I said, since I'm not in the government, if I have to analyze the motives, I can only speculate. But we can look at the facts, as you say. It's, to me, whatever the motive is, it can't be for development purposes. It can't be towards achieving those sectors' goals and objectives. Because in any sector, we have, whether it's education, health, the question is not just about maximizing the number of people who are there. It's making so you have the right people in the right place. Sometimes 5 people can achieve a certain goal where if you put 200 people there, they'll be tripping over themselves. So obviously the goals in the government it's a good idea to have as high an employment as possible. You don't want a lot of people sitting around, but there are ways towards achieving that. In fact, it's not the government's primary role to create employment. You create conditions conducive to employment creation by other actors in the economy. But if your goal is, okay, the army is 5,000, we have a lot of young people unemployed, let's make it 10,000. We still have some young people who are unemployed. How about we increase, we add another 5,000 number of nurses? Or we still have some unemployed. How about we double the number of teachers? You see my point. Just, simplistically trying to just, using a phrase bean counting is not how this thing would be achieved. So you are left with wondering what is the real motivation. And I think one of those is you touched on is maybe cynical political activists paying, rewarding certain groups here and there, which in any democracy is needed. But when you overdo it, it can really get in the way of getting work done.
You've not talked about the wage bill. I mean, we have an overbloated civil service as well, and where you have a wage bill of close to 3 billion with a budget, and yet each time we come, we still have a deficit of almost that size sometimes. And when grants don't come, this is why you will have to resort to either domestic borrowing or international partners to finance that deficit. I mean, how do we manage that? Yeah,
I mean, that wage bill, definitely, nobody would come and tell you right now, we have too many nurses, cut nurses. We have too many teachers, cut teachers, because we need to reduce our expenditures. But you can look at other sectors, like military. If you are already sitting around saying, no, who's going?
Why are you targeting the military?
Yeah, well, because the point I'm trying to make is, who goes around and saying, how much are we spending on the police? Who goes? Because nobody questions the role of the police in terms of internal security. It's essential to have internal security in the country. You need law and order. You need people to respect laws. To respect laws.
Is it because of their bad reputation over the last 22 years, or that's why you're targeting them, or perhaps you think in peacetime they're useless? They can be done. Like chunk of them can be done.
The last 22 years is an effect. See, the problem is, I hope you all listen very carefully to when Sana Sabali was at TRRC and when he was trying to justify their involvement, their coup d'etat. One of the things he kept stressing, and through repeated questioning by ESA, which was excellent, ESA's handling of that was superb. He kept saying the Constitution tells us to be in charge of security, and we are using that mandate, because we saw corruption, and therefore we intervene. In other words, he misunderstood their constitutional role. Now look at the issue of when the army, this PRO and the CDS were defending this Accord venture. What did they say? The Constitution empowers them to be involved in agriculture, health, and even education. Now, this constitution he's referring to is the Yajame Constitution, which, as we all know, is highly defective, which is why we have the CRC to actually revamp it and completely get a new one. So what I'm trying to get at, there's a link between what motivated the coup d'etat and what the thinking is, the fundamental thinking, which is the misconception of their role, the confusion about their constitutional role. That problem that was the cause of the coup d'etat is also the same fundamental misconception which is leading them into this venture. Yeah. So to me, we have to. It's important to be clear about that. What happened in the coup d'etat wasn't some supernatural event that just came in and confused these soldiers.
What is your problem about them going to the farming? Are you saying instead of deploying a battalion to the farming, as a way to avoid retrenchment or the downsizing the army? Yes. So is this an escape? Did you see this as an escape route for them to avoid downsizing the army?
In a way. Okay. In fact, there are several problems, but I think that's one of the ways. Because let's say, the process is important when you're dealing with government, because you need to have institutions in place. Government runs not because of individuals. If you are a minister today, like the ministry of, let's say you are the ministry of, you are the head of the Ministry of Education. We should be confident that processes and policies being implemented in the ministry will continue irrespective of whether or not you are there. It shouldn't depend on the individual. That's why processes and institutions matter. The government functioning and what it does should depend on processes, and those processes should be determined by institutions there. So when you are assessing an activity like the army going into the venture, we should think beyond just a specific activity. We should think about, why is it important for the army to go into this? Number one, first of all, is it the proper role? So tomorrow, if we think about they want to go into tourism or education or construction or wholesale, we have a basis towards to assessing that decision. So today, if the army wants to go into agriculture, the first question we should ask is this the proper role that the military is constituted for, to go into commercial agriculture? Why do we have a Minister of Agriculture? Why?
Now, over the years, 30 years or more, the Ministry of Agriculture, in this case, the government, civilian armed government, have failed to realize any headway in producing enough food for us to feed us.
That's an excellent
export. There have been several projects. You are very au fait with RDP, LADEP, now NEMA, all kind of things. FFXC, when I was young. Still we import rice every day, and we still pay a lot to import rice.
And the military says they can do it more effectively.
If we are given the opportunity, 1,000 men go to that, perhaps we will take it more seriously. We will produce more than the civilian governments have failed to do under successive governments.
That's
not a valid point.
No, it's not. Let me tell you why it is not. Let's take the education sector. We all know, I have looked at the education sector because recently I've done a lot of projects with the World Bank on education, and I'm just finalizing an evaluation of an education program. I have looked at the WASC results from 1998 to present. Our results are terrible by any standard. Do you know the percentage of students that pass both math and English in the WASC? Over the past 10 years, the average is less than 5%. By any standard in the world, that's disastrous. If you compare us with other countries like Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Nigeria, where the average pass mark for those two is around 48%, we are less than the countries that went through decades of civil war. So let's look at the education sector. The PRO claim education in addition to agriculture as one of the areas they are mandated by the Constitution to go into. The failure of the education sector to produce quality education, would that be an ample and sufficient justification for you to have the army now go into the field of teaching? The point I'm trying to make is that I totally agree with you that the agricultural sector has failed, not only currently, not only in Jammeh's regime, but also in Jawara's regime. In fact, the seeds of its failure were planted in the Jawara regime. If you look at the history of agriculture in the Gambia, the history of agricultural policy, what you would find is that the policies that Jawara implemented as a government were no different from the colonial government. In other words, there was a fundamental lack of imagination on the part of the Jawara regime. They failed absolutely with no mitigation in terms of as far as agriculture is concerned. So the point that agriculture has failed and the sector needs help is really true. Now, the question is, if you have such a fundamental failure of such a very significant economy, how do you address that? Do you try to find out what the roots are, looking at both, not just yesterday, but historically, and addressing where the constraints are? The thing is, there are standard and well-established way of addressing agriculture. This is well known. The issue we have in the Gambia, just like in other sectors when it comes to expenditure management, it's not the issue of not knowing what the correct answers are. It's implementation failure. It's knowing what the correct actions are and implementing them. You can write and say all things beautifully. As a consultant, we are hired to write all sort of documents for government. When you read them, you are completely impressed. But the documents go to the government offices and collect dust, because their daily activities are not guided by those frameworks and those strategies and policies. So when you have a sector like agriculture, your government is interested in ameliorating those failures. The first thing you ask yourself is, what are the fundamental problems? Why is it that the agricultural sector, through its premier institution, hasn't been able to address these problems? What can we do differently? But currently, apart from this military venture, just ask yourself, what is the Barrow government doing that's different from what Jammeh has done? What did Jammeh do that's different from what Jawara did? If you look at our agricultural policy, I can sum it on for you. From independence to present, all these three governments think that agricultural policy, the sum total of it is, beginning of the farming season, look for fertilizer and seeds. At the end of the farming season, buy the groundnut and take it off the farmer's hand. This is the totality.
So if you look at the kind of picture you are painting right now with regards to agricultural sector, and this is one of the few, because you've talked about our reliance on tourism and agriculture at the beginning of the discussion. And a lot of people, economists like you, have said that until Gambia diversify its economy and reduce its over-reliance in these two sectors, which are very subjected to external shocks, often you've talked about Ebola and tourism here, which we cannot guarantee can come even next year.
Exactly.
Agriculture, there may not be rain this year. And these are very highly, what do we do? I mean, what other sector do we rely on? How do we fix this problem?
Maybe petroleum.
Well, petroleum is, so far, it's in the...
Well, petroleum we hope will come, but not anytime soon. Yeah. No, this is a good point. The thing is, actually, there is no problem, there is no fundamental problem with relying on a sector if it is in your advantage. There is no fundamental issue with that. The problem is relying on a sector which is unreliable. So agriculture right now, why is it a problem to rely on agriculture in the Gambian context? Because our agriculture sector is completely and totally dependent on the level of rainfall. When rainfall, it doesn't matter what the government does. The government can give $1 billion in free fertilizer. If there are no rains, what use is your NPK?
Absolutely.
So our agricultural sector is totally and completely dependent on rainfall. But rainfall is a natural thing. It's completely erratic and unpredictable. The problem is we are dependent on a sector that at its fundamental base is dependent on a factor that is outside of our control. So we are at the complete mercy of nature. What can you do to address that? As many countries have done before. You don't go in, you go into irrigation. Irrigation, the problem is since independence, we have this little Jahali Pacha. But we have this whole river, the length of our country, that most of it is free. And we have a topography that's mostly flat. This is, in other words, this is the best topography to have a canal system where people's dependence on rainfall will be ameliorated. Even when there is a significant amount of drought, it won't hit production as it normally does for us. So that's important. Also, you know, having a diversified economy is good because it increases resilience to shocks to one particular sector. So we want that. But what is actually very important is that agriculture, if we were to make it highly productive, it will by itself induce the creation of other sectors. For instance, we have an advantage in the processing of like mangoes, groundnuts for groundnut oil, into all sorts of things. But today, if you want to have an industry based on an agricultural output, in the Gambia, you run the risk of, you have this huge risk which is difficult to mitigate because your supply is unstable. You can build a factory with high capacity, but tomorrow, for all you know, the amount of produce coming will be 50% of your capacity. So you have wasted capacity and losses. The following day, you may get lucky. The following year, there's a bumper harvest. For you, that will be good, but for all the farmers, it will be bad because their prices would be low. So predictability in processing and in industrial activity is very important. And the way we remove the our dependence on a risky sector it's not because there's anything wrong with being dependent on agriculture. It's that our agriculture is very erratic.
Can we even afford to not depend on agriculture?
In fact, we cannot because it's a natural advantage for us. We have arable land, we have good land. This land is...
So what we need to do basically is to utilize the river.
Transform it.
Yes, basically the government needs to, we have, if you look at agriculture, you'll see all sorts of problems. What the government needs to do is, it cannot do everything. Some things, in fact, it is not in its role to do. They may seem simple, but it's not in its role. The government shouldn't engage in running in business. We have private sector that can do that. If you create the right environment, let ACO come and team up with another private partner or use their own capital to run the operations on their own. Why do they have to go and team up with the army? Of all the sectors, of all the entities in the country, why the army? Because there is something that is really improper about this deal, which I want to actually expand on. ACO, one thing that the PRO doesn't mention is that ACO itself has a questionable record. This company has been fined by multiple governments for bribery in countries it operates.
Semlex example.
Yeah, it was fined about $18 million by the US government in 2009 for bribing officials in Iraq. The Danish government fined it at least 600,000 euros for bribery. What, did we put any checks in place to ensure that this deal was run properly, that everything is above board, that there is proper oversight? Does the army in fact have the capacity to negotiate with a foreign investor? Even most government entities do not have that capacity. So the point I'm trying to say is, where the Ministry of Agriculture has failed, where other sectors, where Gambia Groundnut Corporation, Gambia Cooperative Union, where these other institutions with decades of experience and expertise have failed, why do we believe that the army will succeed?
So you mention...
Because of their discipline, perhaps, and dedication.
It is the same discipline which caused them to overthrow a civilian government. Is this the same discipline that led to countless human rights abuses?
But then they say they are reforming those attitudes.
And where is the evidence of that reform? We shouldn't take their word for it. We should see the results. Where is the evidence of that reform? When they talk about discipline, come on, let's not kid ourselves. Our army is disciplined relative to whom? We have soldiers, military police who are going around trying to arrest civilians. That's not part of their role. We have soldiers trying to stop vehicles and such, but we know it is not the role of the army to undertake internal law operation. Law enforcement of law and order is the role of police and internal security entities. When I heard the PRO talking about law and order, I laughed. If I wasn't too hungry or thirsty, I would have laughed the whole day.
We expect that.
So,
can I ask this question quickly? You did mention that the government's role is to create the right environment. Can you help us assess the environment that currently is in place, the business environment?
Well, it is, truth be told, it's a huge improvement.
Okay.
The fact that we are here, I'm criticizing the government, is actually by itself is an improvement. Though we shouldn't thank the government for that. It's not. It's not Adam Barrow who gave us that. We did that. Adam Barrow is himself a product of our own activities. So he didn't bestow us this gift. So to be clear about that. Yeah. So what we can definitely credit them with is that even as a foreign investor, if you come in today, you shouldn't worry about your assets being expropriated. Though there are other, when we talk about enabling environment or right environment, there are a couple of things you focus on. Is there law and order? Is there predictability in terms of if there are contracts or agreement? Can you predict things? Because for business, you need to be able to do that. Is there sufficient infrastructure? So you cannot have industries, factories without
stable electricity.
Without electricity. Having your own generator is too expensive. I've seen projects when we were at World Bank trying to finance, projects in other countries where everything looks great except there is no reliable power supply. And if you include the cost of a generator, the project becomes financially unsustainable. So you need to have infrastructure. It's not only energy but roads. You also need to have, basically, a supply of good workforce, skilled workforce. Now, this is so the issue of fear, the issue of expropriation, these are gone. But the fundamental problems of access to infrastructure, skilled workforce, these problems still remain. And
corruption.
Yes, corruption. These problems still remain. So but the government will have difficulty addressing those if it's putting resources it's misplacing resources in other sectors and not investing in education and infrastructure.
Yeah. You mentioned also predictability, and this is dependent also on access to information. Yes. And that's a problem that we face in this country, access to information.
Right.
Especially when, for example, the business community would need to have updates on the economic outlook. And this is something that you don't normally get from the government.
Yeah, the government certainly could do. I'm not sure what you mean by updates on the economic outlook. I mean, it would be good. It would be good to have that. I mean, more information is usually better than less. Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. Could you be specific in terms of the economic outlooks you are referring to?
So what I'm trying to say here is that, for example, most of the information we get is from IMF, and these take periodically, sometimes over an year period.
Quarter
right?
or
But we don't have, for example, the Ministry of Economic updating their information as to what is available in terms of investment advantages, what is available in terms of inflation rate, to predict how businesses are going to fare, either well or bad, in terms of the factors that are available in the country.
Right.
I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah.
But this information is not always available to.
Definitely, the information system, management of this is actually a general problem.
Yeah.
It's not only that, but you can talk about other sectors in health, for instance. Information on, for instance, there was a recent outbreak of there was an epidemic of animals dying in diseases. But that came a bit later.
Covered.
Yeah, it wasn't well covered. There were a lot of, in parts of Badibul, a lot of donkeys died, a lot of goats died. But the information, was discussed very lately, and there wasn't a sufficient information on the quantity, so that one can actually put an economic value of the loss. Talk about maybe a program for compensating farmers, because we know for many households in rural Gambia, their savings account is their animals, is their livestock. So when an epidemic comes and wipes out half of that, it's the same as almost wiping out half of your groundnut production. So you're absolutely right. The way to address that is invest in information systems, because the government itself, for it to operate, efficiently, it needs to know where it is right now, where it is going. Yeah. Without information,
we're not able to predict shocks as they happen.
It's not even a general problem, not just economic problem. But
I think MIS is absolutely significant for every sector.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a general problem. It's not only at this level. I mean, though it's pronounced at this level, but you're absolutely right. This is a general problem, and it's economy-wide, not restricted to one particular sector.
I want to take you back to agriculture, if my colleagues don't have an urgent question. If you look at our agricultural sector, we rely entirely on few cash crops, some of which were brought to us by colonialists, like groundnut. We used to have cotton also, but now that's dead. We used to have sesame. I don't see that anymore. In the Badibus, we used to have it anyway. We do have that too. But if you look at it, there are some who says this is fundamentally wrong in that when pre-colonial Africa was cultivating food crops, they were self-sufficient in food because they were cultivating what they eat. Now, when Europeans had come to create this distortion within the agricultural sector, we are now suffering this problem. And since independence, there are some who are of the view that we should have reverted to the previous order. What's your view? Do you
mean revert in terms of like
cultivating food crops,
yes,
or at least even if we don't just cultivate food crops, but we diversify to order?
No, unfortunately, that train has left the station. This is
the ship has sailed.
Yeah, that ship has sailed. There is the reality is, let's go back a bit of history. In fact, I once wrote a paper with another Gambian, Professor Blai Singh. We looked at historically the agricultural policy. See, it's not only groundnut that was introduced. Even rice as a staple is a recent introduction in the Gambia. What happened was that groundnut, when it was introduced initially a few by the Portuguese. It didn't take off at some point, but it was only when the British started pushing it, they realized the soil was very good for it. So within a few years, we went from a few kilograms to a few tons. And at the time, groundnut was used for a lot of industries in Europe. The problem that created was that as soon as the farmers, once farmers started cultivating groundnut, they were being paid. So there was now an economic incentive. So it spread like wildfire. But the colonial government quickly realized that as more and more farmers use their land to cultivate groundnut, there was less land available to cultivate cereals like millet and sorghum. So we have a potential food crisis in their hands. What did they do to respond to that? They said, well, we have colonies in Asia that grow rice. We can import what the income that the farmers have from producing their groundnut for export to Europe. They can use that income to buy rice from our Asian colonies. So this is how this tradition, which we think goes a long way back, is really very recent. It's only recently that the Gambian population has this system where rice is a staple and our cash crop is groundnut. This is how it started. So over time, basically the colonial government ensured that there was sufficient supply of rice from Asia so that farmers would have no problem expanding their cultivation of groundnut as much as possible. So the thing though with cereals like rice is that they also become very, very easy to manage a situation where you have increasing urbanization. As more and more people leave rural areas, they come to the urban areas, you can no longer ask people in the urban areas to grow what they eat. It's impossible. They just don't live in an area where there's land. So even if we had to, go back to produce what we are doing, you still have a situation in the Gambia today. We are 60% urban, by the way. The most of the bulk of the people live in urban areas. So rice has an advantage over couscous and sorghum in that it is very, the rice bought from the market doesn't need any extra processing, can be produced. I mean, can be cooked and eaten. But, ask a relative to send you a bag of couscous from the rural areas. The first thing you have to worry about how you're going to start like dehusking it and then pounding it. And then once you pounded it, how long will it last before it starts going bad? So that's why rice has an advantage. So once you have this urbanization, cereals like rice, obviously will remain important. Now, to me, it's not very productive trying to dwell on bygone days. There are reasons to making sure our diet is diversified. You don't want to have a diet where you are 100% rice 3 times a day, 365 days a year. It's good to bring things like sorghum, millet, findo, and other things because they are even more nutritious than rice. So how do you do that? And so that there is, make sure first of all there's agricultural productivity, that any farmer growing any of this crop, it doesn't take too much of time to get the right amount of output. If they're able to be productive. Number 2, make sure there's the environment in place to actually induce and incentivize private sector to go into to invest so that these mills are everywhere. Now we are seeing mills that are cropping up, and the ones that are actually sustainable are those that are actually financed by private people. The government finance mills in these rural areas. After 1 year, they break down, there's no money to repair them, they cease operating. But now you see people milling millet and sorghum and other things through private mills. Yeah. They are coming up. So the issue is the government's role should be creating the right environment. To the extent that there's investment needed, make sure that that investment is in public infrastructure or public goods that the private sector is not in a position to provide. When I talk about public goods, think about infrastructure, which a road, a private sector cannot benefit from a road because you cannot monetize the value from it. So that role has to be a public entity. Nationwide irrigation has to be public investment. But when it comes to production, when it comes to processing, when it comes to farming for profit, these are roles tailor-made for the private sector. The government has no role in that. It just needs to create the right environment. Make it easy for investors to come in, whether they are Gambians coming from abroad, whether they are Gambians here. Make the process easy for land to be allocated. Make it easy for, make sure that that land is easily valued. The processes for getting land is there. Make it easy that if they need to get connected to electricity, to power, their generator is done, or their water system, their pumping system. Make sure that this environment is there. Make sure that when people need to find a workforce, our education sector is producing the graduates with the right amount of skills. Nowadays, you talk to high school graduates, they cannot even string together a correct sentence because the quality of the education sector is not good. And part of the reason for that is because the government is not investing enough to have quality teachers and train them very well. So these are the things that government should look at. And if the government is intervening, it should have an idea towards where it's intervening, making sure that it's intervening in the right areas.
I see. Well, finally, when
I have a question before you give your final remark.
Okay.
Is that a question you're going to ask, or is it?
Yeah, but it's that one. So I want to sum it up. Maybe you.
Yeah. So I don't know how we can talk about the right environment and government intervention without talking about taxation, for example. I think last week we invited somebody here to talk about an area where the government have levied high tax on certain products, which affect some industries in the Gambia, and they're threatening to close down. What is your take on this new move?
No, this is a very important point because this is one of the areas that, and I'm glad you have mentioned this in a previous episode, and you keeping it up as a topic of conversation. We definitely need reforms in the tax area. The current GRA Act was enacted in 2004, so it's overdue for reforms. See, there are a lot of issues with our tax. I mean, not only in the act itself, but in the actual activities of the GRA. I mean, most of the staff of GRA, they're doing their job as they're supposed to. But, I can give a few examples. Number one, Gambia is one of those few countries in the world where the corporate tax rate is based on revenue as opposed to net income. So suppose it is as if the people who drafted that act think that all businesses in the Gambia is wholesale and retail, where the moment you start the business, you start making profit. No. If you want to build a factory or a farm, see, the farm and building, it will take about 6 years before I see any profit. Each year I have a huge negative cash flow. The amount of money I put in is far more than what I will get. Yeah. The trees will take years before they mature. If you set up a factory today, you have to put, the whole capital is going to go towards constructing the factory. You will have minimum 5 years before you see a positive net income. So recognizing that, making sure they are not penalizing long-term projects that require long gestation period, most countries in the world, what they in their tax code basically says you pay tax on your net income. So if you are making a loss, you don't pay tax because you don't have a positive net income. You have a negative net income. So if you set up a farm where trees take 5 years to mature, and let's say your trees are producing a small amount of mangoes or cashews, that revenue is small relative to the cost you are putting in. You don't pay tax until after your profit is positive. But Gambia is different. Our GRA Act tax law basically says your tax is based on your revenue. So for instance, if you have a big farm, and this happened to us last year, where your expenditure 1 year is about $6 or $7 million, but you're able to get, let's say, about 500,000 in revenue.
Yes. So what do you do?
The amount that you've lost, your loss for that period is in millions. But GRA would put a tax on that revenue, on that 500,000, and charge you on that. So in other words, they are increasing your cost. During that period, every business has has liquidity problems. In fact, it may seem like a small amount for that business's all expenditures, but it could be the straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah. So we have that problem. So this is something.
The tax system should be reformed.
Yes. This is one example. There are all sorts of issues where, for instance, if you start a project today, the first thing GRA will tell you is you need a deposit of $10,000.
Tax day.
Yeah.
Didn't they eradicate that now?
When?
It's still there.
Well, when I started my business, it was there.
When was that?
About 3 years ago.
I think that's, well, I'm not too sure, but I think they eradicated it.
Maybe I asked a final question. If you look at, you're talking about taxation, I mean, also the only revenue source for the Gambia government, most largely, it's taxation.
Yes.
And government officials obviously will tell you, well, if we reduce taxation, we will have a lot of gap on our budget. So, I mean, where do you mobilize the revenue? Which other source? You cannot rely on loan. You cannot rely on grants. This is also
no. This is a very good question, actually. See, it's true. Tax revenue is, and in many ways, it's good that it's government's main source of revenue, because tax is, if you are paying tax, you start paying attention to what government is doing with your money. So it encourages participatory democracy. It's a good thing. Now the question is, when the government is collecting tax, it shouldn't focus on short term. So think of long-term resource mobilization. Tax revenue is there are three things that determine how much tax revenue the government gets. One is called the tax rate. That is the percentage you have to pay on your corporate tax or your personal your wage bill. The tax rate. There are different tax rates for different actors. Another is called the collection efficiency of the tax the tax body, which is GRA in this case. The third factor, which is the most important, is called the tax base. That is the set of economic activity in the economy that actually generates the revenue. Now, the thing is that these three factors, government has different levels of control over them. Tomorrow, the government can just say, we are increasing the excise tax rate, like they did on alcohol, on Julpro, from 15 to 75, or custom duties, or corporate income tax. So that particular aspect is very easy for the government to control, but it's actually the least important part. What's going to happen today if the government says they are going to increase taxes all the way to 90%? How many people do you think will pay tax? Very few. Most people will go underground. They'll stop registering their business. When they see GRA people coming, they lock their doors. In other words, if you increase the tax rate significantly, what it does to the tax base, the most important part is shrinks it. So these three factors, they are separate and interlinked at the same time. So when government says, okay, we need a lot of revenue and therefore we need to raise a lot of money immediately, what is under their control? They are going to go to the factor that is under their control, which is tax rate. But when you start going to tax rate, increase the tax rate, what did Julbru do? They close. Yeah. So whatever they were paying the day before, tomorrow what will the government have? Zero from Julbru.
Zero.
So when the government has a short-sighted view of revenue and it's just short-sighted goals, it ends up actually kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
And then so what do you do?
So what you do, this is important. Like I said, focus on the long-term tax revenue generation. It's actually in government interest to reduce what it gets from taxes today to ensure that tomorrow what it gets is larger. And what you can do, number one, do not try to do these silly things like put tax on cement imports, put tax on exercise going from 15 to 75. Punitive, avoid punitive measures. That's really, it may seem like it's helping you today, but in the long run you are shooting yourself in the future. It's better to actually reduce your tax revenue today so that you encourage more. Like right now, we have a lot of businesses that are not registered. Around my farm, I ask people around, the other farms around me, none of them are registered.
I think it encourages tax evasion.
Exactly. Yeah. No, people don't comply. They just go underground, you have tax evasion. People will do all sorts of things. Yeah. So when you reduce your these punitive measures, or what they call nuisance taxes, taxes that really going around putting tax on like things that
bicycle repairs.
Yeah, it's like the amount of resources GRA itself spends in going around may not make those things even worthwhile. So you end up a situation where the amount of tax you get in the long term is less, because more and more people will in fact stop paying tax, will not even go to the GRA office to register. I mean, go to the Attorney General's chambers to register in the first place. I
think it boils down to the government policy. The government is elected, the politicians pursue populist programs all around that will get them votes or people's sympathy, just to try to please the people, and they destroy the productive sectors.
That's definitely part of it. Sometimes it's also like, not keeping their eye on the ball. Like, to me, you are already 2 or 3 years in the government, in this new government, and there isn't even, maybe they started, I don't know, but I have not seen any indication that there is even moves towards updating the GRA Act, So those are things, the government should, can do. So I totally agree with your point. Tax revenue is important. No country can develop without depending significantly on tax revenue. If you want to depend on domestic, bond issuances or budget support, those things can be cut off any moment. And in fact, if you depend too much on bond issuances domestically, you strangle your economy.
The boss on the source says there is no time, but I want to ask one question, just one question on the issue of revenue also. This is connected to the taxation issue, because if you look at even the tax revenue we generate. Last year, I think GRA generated, around 10 billion, they said. Okay. But if you look at the expenditure against the revenue government generates, there is always this gap. Yes. Sometimes 3 billion, sometimes 4 billion. Right. And this gap, you need to finance it. And perhaps you resort to domestic borrowing, or you resort to, if there is no budget support. Yes. This is a dilemma. On one hand, you don't want to increase the debt profile for a country that is said to be in a debt distress. On another hand, you need money.
Cut the expenditure.
What do you do?
Yeah, no, it's like I said, cut expenditures where government as a developing country is difficult to like make a proposition that there should be an across the board cut no matter what, some austerity measures. That's difficult to do. Here, yes, like I said, as I said at the beginning, prioritize it. There are some areas that require cutting, cut those. Areas that require more spending, put money on those. Just also to add another point quickly is that that's not fundamentally wrong to run some deficit. It's, if your economy is growing, deficits are not a problem. That as long as they are kept at within a certain limit, when the economy is growing, you can finance and pay for them later. But your economy needs to grow. That's important. And you need to make sure that this deficit is not too high. Yeah, but for a developing country, you always, chances of not running a deficit of some form or another is going to be very unlikely. What is important is run a deficit for the right reason. Make sure you are investing in the right areas. Make sure your expenditure is not bloated by useless expenditures on foreign service, unnecessary embassies, a large military where they don't know what to do, and they want to go into business.
Well, sorry, and definitely, finally,
yes.
You have a problem with the military.
There is no shortage of capacity, knowledge, or good policies, but the problem boils down to lack of will to implement the right policy.
Exactly. Everything I'm saying here has been known to the government.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much, dear Mr. Gajigo. That was a very interesting conversation. It looks like he has some issues with the military, definitely. But
no,
yeah, it is what it is. Thank you very much for granting us this interview. We will now like to move on to our next segment, which is, of course, the entrepreneur, where we profile Gambian businesses. And this week, of course, we feature Grand Villa and Paradise Villa Guest House, owned by Mr. Babukar Cisse. Let's take a look at that, and we'll be right back.
the manager Grand Villa Guest House.
Yeah, I'm my to Ibrahima, assistant manager, the Grand Villa Guest House.
Pour mun a dimbale suñ boppa ba pare mun a dimbale suñ fellow Gambian system, especially youth si moo tax ñu gën a dugga si yëfi business bi waaw. jafe-jafe moom anyway dañ ko dee am waaye bariwut bu baax waaw because am nga jafe-jafe bi mooy xëy na different people nga dee you have different guests nga dee am ñoo xam ne ñu ngi jógee different places so waaw so waaye dañ dee try pour mun a mingu la gaay because suñ guest lañ waaw waaye jafe-jafe moom du dee mun a ñàkk si any business boo mun a def rek waaye ñun dañ dee mun a make sure ñu tackle ko daal satisfy leen.
As it for now, I'm just 4 employees. As time goes on, we're expecting more. For most of the time, I'm US based and I'm UK, Europeans. Though I'm Gambians or Senegalese people, but I'm very
waaw dina nekk lu rëy daal soobee yàlla because 2017 lañ door business bi naa ñu si suñu second season bi waaw waaye fuñ ko séentu in 5 years time comme noo ko waxee dina nekk lu rëy daal bi soobee yàlla waaw ñu ubbi si bi am third place sax because am nañ di second place boobu mu ngi Bijilo that's one called Paradise Villa waaw.
Location bi mu ngi Old Yundum just Paradise Estate si gannaaw rek foofu lañ locate so the easiest access tamit ñu ngi am a billboard si kaw tali bi whereby if you just follow the arrow you can reach to the apartment straight.
Number buñ dee use suñ business line bi 7527218 moom lañ dee use 7527218 moom lañ dee use mooy suñ business line bi.
ok fii suñ business bi amuñ closing time 24 hours job la because li waral loolu tam mooy dang dee gis ne ñu ngi si internet bi and the social media so sometimes dang dee am guest koo xam ne dafa book lately su moo arrive it will be late so moo tax ñu decide ne xam nga ñu def ko 24 hours waaye dañ am a website yes www.grandvillaguesthouse.com lafta min fala comme mon mul ben juwe kam fanan like guest house owning the guest house we call Grand Villa Guest House is a place for everybody among sort of Gambian, among sort of Senegalese, European or Asian or whatever. The momo I feel like Purukanarek is highly welcome. And secondly, for we're expecting more people because jam fangola yellow fango sungo be mo wolti pour youth sol le fana mo most of the time for ka jale jang comme ni nga youth so jam yang ka lafta hamela cool do la na man support to no nke support le like any activities la fana mo you know amon so comme ka for football or wrestling or whatever ni nga je so be ata pour comme ñene rek nke ma ko when we ask for help
Grand Villa pour ñepp la pour Gambians because ñun ñepp Gambian la ñun ñu fi nekk ñepp Gambian lañ so comme num ko waxé rek dañ ko ubbi pour dimbalé suñ bop waye pour dimbalé tam suñ moromi Gambian yi comme num ko waxé muy nga nekk ci football boré woy
Welcome back from that entrepreneur segment. We'll now move along with our news review. So hopefully we will keep it short because we have a system of balance charm. So
hey, there you go. All right, we'll stick with the OIC issue because the beginning of the week, of course, it was actually the biggest story in all the media since it was first broke by the Chronicle. Now, was it a case of postponement or cancellation? We will get to know more of that tomorrow, on Monday, of course, when the government said they will host a press conference purely on this matter. Now, my problem had been, I'm still not in the know as to whether postponement will mean that we don't lose out on all the packages that accompany this summit, such as the $260 million that is meant for infrastructure projects that's coming along with it. Will the postponement means we still keep that, or has those funds already been secured? Or what is the true story about this thing? Did the government know all along that this is not going to happen in Banjul, but they first keep that secret and go around the world to seek for support for the next edition, then they come out to the people to say, well, this is the situation. And in between, of course, the press got wind of it and blew it. Is that what happened?
We can only speculate because just like you, I don't think any one of us know what the facts are. But we knew from a very long time ago, especially when we invited them here, that these people are not ready for what is to come, because we have seen the OIC being hosted in other countries and the number of years it took them to prepare to stage this very important conference. So it seems to me from the very moment that we talked to them and realized that they were not ready, that they knew from that point that this is not going to hold. But of course, perhaps they felt that there is a chance to host it some other time, and the process could continue from here. And also, we also understand that the Minister of Foreign Affairs is going around to meet with other governments around the Islamic world to talk to them. So we now know that next year's or this year's Islamic Summit is not going to happen in the Gambia. We can call that a cancellation. That wouldn't be a postponement. I think this is the move that the minister is now doing, is to re-solicit for the same opportunity to be returned to them for 2022.
I think they're trying to mobilize more funds to do the projects that were supposed to be done before the OIC. Because if you look at the OIC, I think Gambia is more interested in the projects than the actual summit itself.
Yeah, but that's what they call it.
Yeah, because bringing the Arab sultans here brings nothing to Gambia. I mean, of course, the hotels, if you have 1,000 guests in the Gambia, that's a lot of fortune for the hotels. But, you know, for the government, they're looking more at the the projects that comes with the OIC, and this for the presidents who also wants a re-election. Yeah, some part of the money
is already here.
Of course, there were trainings that had happened. There are a lot of there were some goodwill gestures that
electricity.
Yeah, of course, there were a lot of things that had happened already. You know, countries like Qatar. Some bit of money is secured, of course. Of course, the secretariat of the OIC is still operational.
Yeah, that is
People are being paid.
Yeah.
The projects that they've been paid to over there are projects. There are things that are still here. You understand? Even the media component, the publicity component of the project.
The worry is
so there was some money.
So that we now, as the government is claiming or giving the impression that we are guaranteed that we will host the 2020.
But how can we be guaranteed? How this OIC summit took Gambia years and years and years to fight for.
No, because
you think it will take us just 2 days to get it back?
You know how it goes. It's just like the World Cup. It takes years before you win the bid or you give it the right to host.
Yeah.
But now, what's going to be important, what people are anxious about is, are we guaranteed that we're going to get 2022? Or the government is still looking for that guarantee?
I think that's what is happening. With the minister touring, I think that this is what is happening. They're trying to secure support to bring back the opportunity, because the first one is lost already. I don't think it's cast in stone that 2022 we're going to host the OIC. At this point, no, that's not.
For me, if you ask me, I think what the government is doing is as they've done before. We've lost it. They didn't want the partners to know they've lost it because they're trying to mobilize funding. I think the government's ultimate goal here is not the OIC. I think their ultimate goal here is to raise the money for the projects, whether OIC comes 2021 or not.
No, it doesn't matter.
So look at Tangara when he went to Bangladesh and when he went to Morocco. What he told them was, we want you people to back us to host it by 2022.
But if there's no
they are calling, now they are trying to mobilize the support of the Muslim countries. But this is an opportunity that Gambia has and lost it. Look, OIC is the biggest organization, second to only UN.
Yeah.
Now you have all those countries trying to host it. You think you will have the opportunity this year, messed it up, and have it next year?
Only with the backing, they hope, only with the backing of the, because it's also not just Gambia stone, but Africa stone. If the African key players, such as the Maghreb countries, Nigeria, etc., keep faith with Gambia and support Gambia.
No, why would they?
Yeah, but that's why he's touring. That's why he's touring them.
Yeah, but what incentives does Gambia have? What privilege do Gambia have that these people will want to support it the second time?
That is it. Now, the country is begging for time. They believe in time they will be able, in 3 years' time, they will be able to put up all the necessary arrangements that's not available on the ground. Now, if they got Nigeria, Sudan, Morocco, Algeria, backing them, they will go to the OIC and present that we still want Africa to keep it. And this is the country that will host. If they can get that, then yes, of course, it's still.
I think that's going to be difficult, because you have to also look at the mess Gambia creates by doing what it had done. When Gambia took up the OIC, they left it to Saudi. Saudi is not the most popular country in the Muslim world right now.
Yeah, but
I'm not saying they are not popular. They are the biggest funders. Like America is in UN, they are in OIC. That's clear.
But Saudi is still very, very important.
Yeah, but they are not that popular.
Yeah,
Saudi is the cause of the Qatari blockade. They have this problem with the UAE. They have these problems with the UAE. They have these problems with Turkey. So you take it from one. Like there is these two factions. Yeah. You take it from one faction and give it to another faction. Then you are caught up in this ping pong.
Yeah, I think some time ago Turkey did promise to make some funding.
Absolutely. And now we are caught up. We create a tension ourselves by giving it to Saudi.
Which areas do you blame the government in the handling of the whole affair? One, the lack of honesty to come out at a time that this is not possible in 2019. Or the fact that the time they come into power, they found nothing on the ground that they can continue to do it. So where do you blame them?
Look, I think that contributed. The impasse and the kind of crisis situation we found ourselves in, the economic situation, the domestic politics, the TRRC, there is so much to do in the Gambia. that it's going to be almost near impossible for you to give OIC the kind of attention it requires. We know that. The funding issues were also there. That's also true. But the time also.
But because of our desire to get the accompaniment use that come with it, we were not frank enough to say at the very beginning that we can.
And also it serves more purpose to push OIC if there is that opportunity than to do it now. Because if you push the OIC, it gives you more opportunity to do a lot of things before OIC. Yeah. And that also serves the Barrow agenda, because election is in 2021. You understand? That no, it syncs with the political agenda. You can.
Here's what I think.
Well, it's important if he does.
I think the failure began where you have a team of people who are supposed to work on a project, but they don't have a clear idea of what it is exactly that they're supposed to do. You remember when we brought them up on this platform, they couldn't tell us clearly what it is that they wanted to do. You needed support from people who are going to fund projects. But if they don't know where the money is going, because you are not clear on what to provide, you're not clear on what facilities to build.
It's not just a mayor summit, it's a project for
but
2 years.
They could not explain what this project is.
What they didn't do.
What was this project?
What they didn't do at the time was to be frank that it is not going to be possible.
The bottom line is, Honorable, what we needed to do to build the roads, to build the hotels, to build this and that cannot be done within that space of time we had.
That's what they did not.
You understand?
Yeah, especially with more funding in place at that point in time.
Yeah, and for the government, for me, even if I were in the administration, if I had the opportunity to do what they've just done now, if there is that opportunity to push it to 2022, which I doubt, and I think we've lost it. Yeah. But if we still have the opportunity to push it to 2022, if I were a Barrow, I would do it because that's what serves my agenda, and that's what's good for the country. Because
I have no trouble with that. I'm saying the time it took them to do that is where the devil is. If they had said from the very beginning when they came to power to say, look, this we inherited, but it cannot be done in 2019. They inform all the IOC players that we are bidding for 2022 from the very good 2 years ago. Yeah. I mean, they would have been more sympathetic to them now. That's what I'm saying.
But diplomacy doesn't always come with honesty, Honorable. You know that. Now, if Gambia if Gambia had done that, remember that there are a lot of supports already we've had for the OIC. Right. Even our security sector have benefited a lot. The media also have benefited a lot.
When they came to power, there was nothing on the ground.
I mean, there will be a higher
price. Yeah, but they've done something.
If it turns out, there will be a high price to pay if it turns out that funding has been previously given by some other government or support has been given, and now that they have lost it, that means that what has been given may not be recovered.
Yeah, right? And they are not happy. And they are not happy.
Willing to come back again to support whatever.
They will not be happy.
Particularly Qatar, Turkey, UAE. Because they are not going to be happy.
They will not take
and these are the biggest funders.
Yeah,
they will not take you seriously. Yeah. And the fact that you give it to their opponent.
Yeah, and the fact that you give it to a journalist killer.
Yeah, that's right.
The Khashoggi,
you kill Khashoggi. The major story. Of course, we are concerned with time, so yeah. I hand the floor back to you.
Yeah. So with your permission, perhaps we should move on.
Let's move on to the next topic. If we don't, then we just carry on with what's trending on social media.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So two things are trending on social media. For example, last week I think a group of people went out to protest, calling themselves 3 years Jotna, and we understand that they've been arrested,
uncharged,
bailed, and charged. And so the civil society is now mobilizing people to show solidarity with the people who have been arrested in order that they would send a message to the government to let them know that this is not something that is acceptable, and moving forward people can exercise their rights without any constraints, especially considering that there is this Public Order Act that is in place that democracy advocates do not necessarily agree with. So on social media is the platform that this mobilization is happening. I understand that there is going to be a meeting at Tango on Monday where they are going to come up with some resolutions for the IGP, which may include legal actions to be taken against them.
And protest.
More protest.
Yeah. So another thing that is trending on social media, this like a chain of events are happening with regards to land dispute cases involving the minority groups in Combo South. We understand that Kunkujang Mariama residents have been asked to vacate within a few period of time.
By the Sheriff Division, High Court.
Exactly. Apparently, according to the news that is out on this issue, there is no evidence that any of these things has happened in the court. That there was, in fact, how do they call it? There was, in fact, any sitting in the court that addresses this issue, where the document that is being brought to the people at Kunkujang Mariama to vacate could have come from. I don't know if that makes sense.
You mean the Sheriff Division?
Yeah.
Acting in isolation.
The document indicates
the Sheriff Division would not agree if there was not a court decision.
The news state that there was no evidence that there was a decision taken in court on this. But there is a document that suggests that it came from.
Okay, that's the social media news.
That is the social media news, obviously.
Because the Fourier reported this, and it's and the Fourier's report, it's clear that it's the Sheriff Division that's it's.
Yeah, and Sheriff Division doesn't act without a court order. Yeah. But what do you make of the comments in social media again? People were trying to say, much as we believe in the independence of the judiciary, and we want hands-free, the executive and everybody from the work of the judiciary, they still find these kind of judgments irrational, which calls for the total eviction of whole communities. They find it irrational. Where does this leave us now?
Does it even make sense in the first place? I think the problem here is that we don't have land policy or land acts that are clear, that are updated, that are enforceable at this point. Because in 1991, there was a land policy that states that every land in the Greater Banjul area belongs to the government.
But the problem
so
is,
individuals
in the Gambia, every land in the Gambia, in fact, belongs to the government.
Belongs to the government.
The circumstances are different.
But my point is,
this is not some people encroaching on land that is being administered by the state. That's different. This thing goes back to many decades or even a century ago. And it is all customary. Like, I have my land, you are my guest, I gave it to you to settle and farm. All right? And now you claim ownership, I cannot get it back. It's basically, these are the issues they have there.
But my point is, the problem is an understanding of what is customary and what is conventional. Right? We know that there used to be customary land policies. Currently, we have a policy that overrides that. When there is a policy that says all lands in the Greater Banjul areas, Mustafa is saying is extended belongs to the government. That is suggesting that there is no customary ownership. I don't know if you get my point. But in people's mind, that there is still traditional ways through which you can own lands. But this is what is not being clear. So there is no sensitization made for people to understand that there is no longer customary ownership of land.
So people still have.
What happens is when you acquire a land, you are required by law to lease it. Then you become a temporary custodian of that land by the policy.
Government can still take it from you.
Government can still take it from you if you default in payment.
But look at the problem.
Right? But many people are acquiring land.
What can government do now if some people from Gunjur said that the people who are in Mariamakunda are settling on their ancestral land and they want to take that? What can the government do now?
No, this is a conflict situation.
Yes.
Now, in that kind of a situation, a responsible government would go and sit these two parties down and see what is amicable.
Okay.
We know also in our old tradition, people don't sell land. When you come, they say, okay, jam alsesino jan. Here, use this for a farm. They don't sell land to anybody.
Yes.
So when that happens, now when your great-grandfather gives that to my great-grandfather, and this is the only place I know I call home. Now when you want to take that from me, the natural default setting is that I will resist. Exactly. Because that's, I would call that my... Now, in that kind of a case, a responsible government would not sit at a corner and wait until there is war and then sell soldiers there. That's what our government does.
Okay, now
what I will refer us back to where the primary source of this problem is. There is also a land policy that says if an individual or groups of individuals are allowed to remain on a land for a period of 12 years, it automatically becomes theirs. So in Kunkuja Mariam...
No matter the circumstances how they acquired.
Yes.
Oh, well,
okay. If they stay
but
there,
if it had been,
stay there for up to 12 years, they can claim ownership.
Now, how about?
And majority of these incidents are coming from people who have settled on this land for so many years.
Yeah.
And then you have, because of the value for money of a land now, they're claiming ownership. I think the government has a responsibility to be clear on their policies and to enforce these policies and make.
We've talked about this here many times. This can only be solved by the government.
Exactly.
Nobody hears anything from the so-called land commission that are being established. No one even knows the areas that they are looking at. Nobody knows which lands there is tension. We are like sitting on a nuclear bomb. Like no one, nobody, they're not thinking, at least they're not telling anybody anything. Faraba, it happened for a long time. They wait until people are killing each other, they go there. They send soldiers there and they kill people there. They said Gunjur until they wait until, and these things have been a subject of court
was this now
cases.
Or is you, like you are saying,
they've been in court for 3 decades, some for 2 decades, some for a decade.
Somewhere ruled and others appeal against, and still like a Banjuluddin case. So it will remain there like, what must this be left with the courts, or the government should come and directly intervene by drawing a line that, look,
government should.
People who have settled here for 20 years cannot go.
Government should. And now, if, for instance, a place like Mariama Kunda, you're not just looking at, Kunkujam Mariama. You are looking at a setting for pilgrimage. You are looking at a small maker, so to speak. Now, you are also looking at, that's the right of a religious minority. Now, you are also looking at, yes, that thing becomes more sensitive, especially where religion is involved. Everybody is thinking.
It's even more sensitive for the fact that majority of these cases that are coming up involve only a particular minority group.
Yeah, so it becomes
that makes it even more sensitive and requires
it has both a religious and tribal
dimension, and that's what makes it sensitive.
Yeah, because the people who said they are the early owners or ancestral owners belong to one particular tribe, and the people who are now settling there belong to another tribe and different religion. So it is a sensitive matter, and like you said, I don't think this matter should be left with the court. Much as we believe in independence.
No, courts can make their decision. But as they say, I mean, the truth is that you are not also looking at what is right. You can grab this land. If my great-grandfathers, for instance, grab a land from your great-grandfathers, for instance, let's give that example because they had powers at that time. But the children and children of those people
come and pay for that.
Now, so you are looking at the emotional dimension of what a responsible leader would do.
Why didn't the government put these land issues as part of a transitional justice program, such as the TRRC, the CRC, established a fund, a sort of a reparation or compensation. Community lands like Kunkujam Mariama, you say go to the ancestors, the people who are complaining about the land. Look at it and say, look, these people have settled here, we cannot move them.
But that's already in place.
Let's
land reform in place.
There's a land reform commission in place.
But it's not, where is their office?
Except that, we don't even know what they are doing.
So the TRS is moving, everybody's excited what is happening. CRC, they are flying all over now, trying to get it. And people are killing each other over land. Nothing has been done about it. That's the problem.
And the estate companies, we've said it here time and time again.
There is no policy that's regulating the estate agencies and their activities in place. And they are at the heart of every conflict with land that's happening.
With the connivance of government institutions, because the government should be the referee and
absolutely.
So, Sadio,
I think the only people hurting people more regarding this land issue is the real estate owners or whatever.
But they cannot operate when they are
and the real estate, the real estate companies gain a lot from these things.
Those who regulate them, it won't happen.
Absolutely.
Anyway, that's it for what's trending. I think we will now move along. So we will take our first commercial break, and when we return, we will invite our second special guest here. We will now go with our short break, and we'll be right back.
Dreaming of owning a property in a prime location with great proximity and fantastic neighborhood? EJ Investments Sanyang Seaview Estate is the best choice you have been waiting for. Our Sanyang Seaview Estate is approximately 15 minutes drive away from the busy hub of Brusubi roundabout and into the heart of nature, where you can have a peaceful and relaxed lifestyle with your family. You can buy a finished 4-bedroom story with 5-year flexible payment plan or a service plot with 2-year payment plan option. With over 300 homes, you will enjoy big tar roads with covered drainage, modern electrification with solar street lights, gated entrance with security post, and a breath-catching experience of our beautiful sea view and lake view. You can own a home today at our Sanyang Seaview Estate. Call us today on 446-4838 or 325-9220. Visit our website on ejinvestments.net. EJ Investments, first in property. Dreaming of owning a property in a prime location with great proximity and fantastic neighborhood? EJ Investments Sanyang Seaview Estate is the best choice you have been waiting for. Our Sanyang Seaview Estate is approximately 15 minutes drive away from the busy hub of Brusubi roundabout and into the heart of nature, where you can have a peaceful and relaxed lifestyle with your family.
That's I'm a cheese bar. Fulani, yeah. Wow. Sammy Gasa them Gambia. Name of the chill spot, baby, yeah. Me say Granville. Name of the chill spot, we chillin'. Go in, yo, Granville. Name of the chill spot, baby, yeah. Me say Granville. Name of the chill spot, we chillin'. Go in, yeah. Wanna have a cool place to live here. Grand Villa at the place to be here. Cool view, come chill and relax. Have fun, enjoyment to the max. 752-7218. Take a phone call to Grand Villa, yeah. Special treatment for the idea. Right place to be, so I'm telling you, yeah. It's the right place to be. Come have fun and enjoy the life. Cool place to be. Yeah. For more information, just log on to www.grandvillaguesthouse.com.
Welcome back from that short commercial break. Like I said, we have another special guest, or guests if I may say, in the studio from the Gambia Press Union. As we know, we are gearing up to the Journalism Award this year. And of course, we have Musa Sise, who is the chairman of the awards committee, and Hadija Jawara from the Gambia Press Union. Welcome to the brunch, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
So what are we looking forward to this year? What's new?
What's new? For this year, I can say one of the changes we made is in the award categories, because the previous years we were only concentrating on awarding journalists, but this year we have improved on that. So apart from that, we have award categories that are targeting media institutions. Like, for example, we have the TV station of the year, the radio station of the year, the newspaper or the online platform of the year. And then apart from that, also we have the journalist of the year, radio journalist of the year, newspaper journalist of the year, and TV journalist. So some of those are some of the new additions we have, and the overall best journalist of the year. So that's something new people can look forward to for this year's award, because it's going to make the award more interesting also.
Interesting categories there.
Well, this forum is actually not to start by critiquing the awards components, but to exactly know first, how do I get to be nominated, how do I participate? Then if we cover that, then we can come with what people observe about the last award.
The award is actually not based
the
on
categories. Let's talk about the categories.
The categories.
How many of them together?
We have in total 22 categories. Apart from the ones I listed, you also have the health and medical reporting of the year, the sport reporting of the year,
environment,
business, finance, tourism and culture, and all. So those are some of the categories, but in total you have 22 categories.
How do journalists participate?
To participate, you have to submit your studies to be considered, because we know journalism award is different from other awards. So So you, if it is newspaper, you can send in your news articles, including the form, because we have an application form you fill and submit there. Because the application form also has a synopsis area where you have to give an idea about your story and also the impact your story has on the lives of the people. So the same goes for radio, TV, it's the same thing. You attach your story based on the category you are applying for, fill the form, and then submit it. You can submit through online at the press union's website. You can submit through email, and then you can submit through the hard. You can submit the hard copy address it to the chair here, who is sitting, to the chairman of the award committee.
Now, who are the people who go over this to make judgments?
Thank you very much, Jam, for having us. This mic was up here and so on, Fatu. That's a big thing. But anyhow, in answering your question, these are eminent, 7 eminent personalities identified by the board of the Gambia Press Union to be judges. These men and women have no affiliate to anything or any press or any media house in this country, independent and of course respectable, we believe they are. Some of them are even not locally resident, but we believe and trust in their ability to judge and bring the best out of Gambian journalists to, who are fitting, rewardees of any accolade that could be identified as an award for the press, those practicing in the Gambian press and media.
What do they get finally, apart from praise, 10, 15 minutes or 1 week celebrity? What do you take home? Trophy?
This is a recognition job.
I think we are all in the media,
I won one back in 1999 with the GPU. All I got was an air ticket that was raffled between 6 other listed Ghana Airways air ticket. I never got to fly. I don't know what happened to my ticket. but I was award winning. That time it was very much acclaimed. It was really.
And you are still proud of it.
Yes.
Well, you are.
But I have hard voices. That said, with the kind of GPU we have now, with lots of projects, money is coming on, just as the Barrow government has grants and everything. There should be at least some tangible, very good monetary prize given to motivate them. Do you have any such?
Yes.
I'm talking to what I have.
But that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah,
that's no problem. Of course, you have to give out monies that you have and that belongs to you. When you mention projects are projects, and monies that comes for projects are meant for projects.
Yeah.
Monies meant for the award will only be going to the award. And this award is strictly based on funding, on support and sponsors that are being sent to potential businesses out there to fund to make this award a success like any other award. If only big institutions and corporations can come forward and fund the GPU award that is meant to celebrate the practicing journalists in here, then probably you can think of any fat check that can be given.
So there's no cash.
We are not saying that.
There's no cash.
We're not saying that.
No, people want to be clear about it.
We're not saying that.
There is something.
If you just allow me to say
if you say it now, some people are motivated.
Allow me. We're not saying that for now. We are hoping that with the amount of sponsors, potential sponsors to the various categories that have been sent to the business community and of course institutions out there, if the response is positive, then there might be monetary or any sort of reward to any of these categories that are out there identified. We are not closing the door in suggesting that there might be a monetary reward or any item for any potential winner or any possible winner. If and we're going to stress this thing, if the money comes in, yes, there's going to be a monetary reward.
So if I'm a reporter over there, a young reporter who's trying to make sure this half promise of perhaps monitoring is also going to be a motivating factor.
Put it at 75. We will give it a 75 promise. But hopefully, based on, like Musa said, if we get a response from our sponsors, but we are very hopeful.
Now, apart from this individual categories you talk about, there's a category for whole media houses to be best newspaper, best online, best. How do they participate? If I'm a reporter individual, I submit my work, but what about a newspaper?
Newspaper
or a radio?
It's the same thing. You submit your work. For example,
what they consider to be the best work.
The best work.
Yeah.
If you have a program, for example, if Kelfat wants to submit the brunch as their best program, then they will submit 5 editions of the brunch. They felt that these are the best 5 programs we had and submit that for consideration.
Now, Kelfatu has 3 components. We have, of course, we have this recording video thing, but also we have a website too. And in a situation where I, Mustafa Keda, was going to apply, and the stories I am going to also apply for Kelfatu website.
By the way, the question is very personal.
This is a critical one. This is a critical one.
So where are you applying? Are you applying for the online or newspaper platform of the year, or as the broadcast media of the year, or are you applying for the? Because I know you don't do radio, but you do.
Say we don't do radio,
but you do broadcast.
We do online.
But you know you have the media for the online or newspaper of the year. Then you have the broadcast media of the year. So it depends on where are you guys applying.
So for instance, let's say we're going for media of the year. Like let's say we said media house of the year.
No, we don't have media house of the year. We have the broadcast media or the newspaper or online media.
Okay, let's say we're going for online media of the year, and the publications we've done were, say for instance, done by Alaji Sise, right? And Alaji Sise's publications happens to be.
I see where Saja is coming from.
No, I'm giving you an example. And Alaji Sise's publications that are going to be submitted for his own personal awards are stories we believe to be the best stories published by Kelfatu. Now, in that case, you will have Alaji Sise's publication and the one he submits for Kelfatu to be the same.
Yes. But we have to understand it here, as you suggested, you as an individual, you deliver for Kelfatu, isn't it? And what you deliver for Kelfatu is Kelfatu's property, isn't it?
Absolutely.
If you are able to distinguish that this is my private, personal job for another media house or another medium, and I think that problem stems from whatever you as Mustafa has with Kelfatu. You have license whatever you produce for Kelfatu. It belongs to Kelfatu, not you.
He's suggesting that.
So that means, but both publications can be made, right?
But also, if you look at the award rules and guidelines, it's very clear. You can submit 2 stories in a category, but you cannot submit 1 story based on 2 categories. I think the award rules and guidelines is very clear.
So that means.
So
you don't understand him. He's saying that.
No, I heard him very well.
If I am competing, you know, as a sports writer, for example, all right, on my sports, I believe that this sports story really make more impact in the country than anywhere. I believe that. I submit that to George as my individual entry for individual categories. The Standard believe that, look, this is perhaps the best story that the Standard covered.
Those are 2 different
now,
things.
if I forward it and it happens to be my same story, am I not? Is it because they come from the same source? Would that jeopardize, you know, both of them being?
It might. Let me say this thing very clear, and this is a very important point in here, which I think we might need to take up with our judges to identify, because this is the first time we bring in media houses, and media houses, of course, do have to have their own product that they need to present to, as a submission, to be studied by the judges to determine whether it fits. If, as I was saying to Mustafa's, you work for Kelfatu, all your productions are for Kelfatu, and Kelfatu happens to be contesting for a category and the best media house and use your product, can you use that as a submission into the award to win something? Yes, it is. We need to identify those tools. How do we distinguish where the submission stands? It is important, but I think this was something that we gave a good thought. But having brought it, brought it up, we will have to definitely look at it and to identify whether it shouldn't be anything that you as an individual can bring up, or the institution also don't have to bring up what you bring up.
Moving on, when can I get, and when is the award?
The applications are closing on the 31st of May. That's the end of this month. And the award is on the 12th of July.
So how are the submissions looking up so far?
So far, it's good, but we always experience this problem. Right now, it's coming gradually, but the last 2-3 days, you will have people bombarding us with submissions. But so far, at the pace it is going this year, I was really surprised.
So the judges would have 12 days to look at it?
Huh?
11 days?
No, like it's ending on the 31st of May, and the award is in July.
Oh,
so
July?
The judges have enough time, because remember, we have to also publicize the nominees, who are the nominees for the different categories too.
So in terms of the, I mean, you have some people who are journalists, and at the same time they work in the union. Say for instance, me. I need to ask this.
I think I need to make something very clear.
People need to know what
you fail to understand his role. You don't work at the union.
No, I am not saying I'm working at the secretariat.
Yes.
But the common man thinks,
yes. I think, okay, this is a very important point.
Conflict of interest.
Yeah, let me explain this part very clearly. I think we have the GPU board. The GPU board selects the award committee, and then the award committee also select the judges. So the board has nothing to do with the judges. It's independent. The award committee, even us in the award committee, we have clear terms of reference which say that we are not even answerable to the GPU board. No. We are very independent in our work. So which means even when we are selecting the judges, we don't consult the GPU board. They have no say in it. So which means we are totally independent from the individual order. So and the judges also are independent, because when they are sitting, we don't sit there. We don't know how they make the decisions, because they make decisions individually. Then after they meet together as a group, justify why they choose someone, then the final results goes to the chairman here, who is Musa. So which it doesn't even go through the GPU or through the GPU executive audit.
So if Mustafa gets awarded for best investigative journalist of the year, it doesn't mean that he won it because he's vice president of the GPU, but his work is that's what he's trying.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
I think Cham understands what I'm driving at.
I think you want to make that very clear. So that people know that you are coming.
That's very important. That's very important, because
it's an important point.
I mean, people look for very flimsy excuses.
Yeah, exactly.
To suggest otherwise. Because I think what's important in these awards to note is that yes, everybody wants to win an award. To be an award-winning journalist means you really have to work doubly hard. And this is not about dumbing down on anybody or anything. If you want to be a broadcaster, if you want to see your broadcast material fit for good broadcast to be pitted against, the best out there, it has to be top-notch.
Now, not all awards, of course, fit everybody's expectation. You have a panel that you think are well informed on top of the job because they are journalists or might have something to do with journalists. But the public always sometimes disagree. For example, if Lavin Cham is voted today as the best investigative journalist today, somebody sitting somewhere said, well, was it not Mustafa who broke the scandal about the agriculture thing? I think that's the best.
To him or her?
So to him. Now, a lot of people can form their opinion. Said, look, I think these judges have no clue. They didn't know that this was the best story of this thing. So how do you manage those kind of ill-informed or informed or perhaps opposition or critique of the award? Does it help you?
I think they are not new.
Does it help you? No, does it help you? Does it help you to get even more scrupulous? And what do? Or you just put you off?
No, it doesn't put me off in any way. I mean, this is a circle in which we operate in, and it's very fine. In these days, social media and people inundated with their own opinions and in self-aggrandizements. What I think is what is right. Therefore, I think who I am. That's not what we are. This thing is seeded to a group of individuals who we believe trust are going to do as a good job. And the good thing about a contest is, the best example is, day in, day out, wherever you go in the length and breadth of this country, and we do all over, Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi, who is the best? No, this
people have their preferences.
Up till today, Pele stands on top of the wall. To others is Maradona, to others is Johan Cruyff, to others is Beckenbauer, to others is Ronaldo. Who is who? But every week or every year, someone is voted as the best of this. And others would not buy it. So what do you do? And that's exactly the good example that you gave us in here. If Mustafa but Lamin Cham did it, why not Lamin Cham? Why not Mustafa? Why not Sajo? Why not Khadija? Why not Musa? What do you do with it? A good example is
stick to your art and your best judgment.
And we are press freedom advocates. We have to respect people's opinion, and we know that people will have opinions on everything. But I think the most important thing is that we always try to make sure that
this is not just outside. There are in fact competitors. Who felt that, I mean, they are
what categories are
using what they call their own, good journalistic skills.
But what is not? You take a free kick, I take a free kick, and then they all went in, and then it's a good, beautiful goal. No, that goal is my best goal. No, it's Lamin Cham's goal. No, it's my goal. Yeah. Where are we? Because your efforts you think are better than mine. No.
So your judges, are they? You can say what you want to say.
No, I was just trying to
actually ask if the judges are previous journalists, because I remember there was a time after the.
You don't want him to identify the judges.
But whether they were journalists.
No, we do. We actually, before the award, we always make sure that we publish the profile of the judges so that people will know that these are the people who are. And then also, to look at best practices also, they don't have to be only journalists, because you have to have people from different sectors of the society. Because remember also the categories are based on different sectors of the society. Yeah. And if you are reading in agriculture, I can be a good journalist, but I'm not an expert in agriculture. I don't know whether the message you are talking about, it's the right thing. So that's why we try to make sure that, I know like sometimes our people will say that, okay, but why did this person judge my work and the person is not a journalist? But remember also they are journalists in the panel, and also we want experts from other sectors there to sit in the panel. And sometimes also if you are in a sector for too long, you can be blinded by what's outside there. So you need people who are also outside there who can gauge, who can give you an objective opinion on certain things. So that's why we make sure that we look at people across the sector, not only journalists. We have academics, we have journalists there, we have experts from different areas also who sit in the jury panel. And we make sure that these are not people who are very familiar with the journalists. Their interaction with the journalists are limited. Because if you are very familiar with a person, sometimes it is very difficult to be objective. And to do this work, you need to be very objective when you are trying to decide whose work is the best.
And there are some weird suggestions like, why don't you keep it very, very few to make it more keenly competitive and more prestigious, as well as in therefore more cherished? Like if you said, why do you have to go to Canada? If you say journalist of the year, that can be a sports journalist, it can be an entertainment journalist, it can be a political journalist. Why don't you keep it there? Journalist of the year, newspaper of the year, online report of the year. Why do you have to go to find a sports report of the year, a farming columnist of the year? Why do you spread it all like that? Because if people think it will saturate quality, you will have to fetch for somebody anyway, whether or not it's article.
That's a great question, Mr. Cham. But also remember, our role also is to promote the development of the country. And to do that also we have to encourage, because one of the key roles as journalists also is to promote the country's agenda and everything, whether we like it or not, but that's our role. But to do that also, there are certain sectors in our society. For our society to move on, these sectors have to work very, very well. And these sectors, we cannot ignore them. When it comes to agriculture, we know that whether we like it or not, people tend to concentrate a lot on the politics and everything, even though everything is politics and everything. But we forget the development sectors. Yeah, I'm coming to your question. We forget the development sectors of the society. So, like agriculture, health, children's reporting, women's reporting, these are very key critical areas we cannot ignore. And then they tend to be ignored in our news reporting. So one of the one of the slogans of the award is to promote excellence in journalism, and to promote excellence also we have to look at these sectors and everything, and so we cannot ignore those things. And even though like we have a lot of categories, everything, but even if you look at the nominees when they come out, the shortlisted candidates, sometimes categories don't go. We will not have any nominees because the judges are looking at the standards. So in the end, the amount of people we are awarding and the amount of nominations that come out, there is always a big difference because we have to have the best of the best and everything. But these categories, we are not put there by mistake. It's very, very deliberate because these are the areas we want our people to concentrate on a lot. But because if you start motivating them to report on these areas, they will report on these areas, and we have to report on these areas if we want to move our country forward, because we are shining the light on what's happening in the country, and these areas we cannot ignore them.
I think that's absolutely important, because we are everyone is caught up in the hype of politics, you know.
Yes.
Paolo said this and everybody wants
That was said that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Cham, just to buttress what Khadija was trying to say is that, I mean, how many experts do we have? We have generic experts. Everybody's an expert on something. Where are they? Where are they specialists in all these things? Anybody is free to comment on anything that you think. You think you can say anything that you want. But what do you know about it for real? For real, and I mean, we have politics, I mean, health, sports, agriculture, tourism, finance, banking, you name it. We have people speaking all over the spectrum on all these things when their knowledge is limited. And we're encouraging people as a society, as a country, you know what, before you speak about some of these things, please sit on it and be someone who is credibly aware, well informed. But this is something that we need to encourage, and that's what GPU is also doing for journalists. Before you write some of these things, please be very, very, very conversant.
Prepare yourself.
Yeah.
Prepare yourself. Be a master of your own trade, then nobody will question you. But the reason why we have some of this proliferation of comments and so on, because the airwaves are free, they are open, they call it certain freedom, which we are not discouraging. But we're encouraging expertise, we're encouraging advancement, we're encouraging knowledge-based comments on a society that is yearning for progress. And if we cannot be seen to be doing that at the level of the GPU, probably we might be failing in some of our responsibilities there.
So it means there is no judges are not compelled in any category to award any category.
No.
I mean, they can just, all categories, in fact, they can just decide that all of these 10 categories, we will not award anything.
Yeah, because if it falls below us, and
all they can dismiss, reject all entries in one category.
You remember last year, was it last year? Yeah. Last year, I think we had 2 categories, or is it a category?
Three
categories, which the judges deemed that the submissions were really below standard. And we should not be surprised with that, I think. The reason why, because in normal circumstances, if you brought me a story that I think is really written by, if the language, for example, is too low, unfortunately it's published in a certain paper or is published or broadcasted in a certain medium, but it wasn't well looked into, but it was just there to fill an airtime, it might not fly for an award.
Yep.
And even to be judged. So if it happens again, so be it. But what we're trying to do is that for anyone submitting those kind of things, please raise your game. Raise your game.
Yeah, but to make it clear, like you said, is that okay, the judges are not just looking at which one is the best among the entries, but whether all the entries, have reached the standard that is.
There's a particular.
And this year also, this is something we have discussed, and we have even raised the standard a bit higher. Because to promote the best, you have to be called the best, you have to be the best and everything. So, and even if you look at our media houses, if we are doing an honest assessment, sometimes we need a lot of work to do, and we have to improve on, we have to boost our game. And so this year we deliberately, we have even the criteria and everything, the judges, what they are going to be looking at, so we have improved the standard. So let's see what the decisions the judges are going to make. It's going to be interesting.
It is very interesting. Cham, you would attest to that, if you want to be a broadcaster, you have to have a rich vocabulary. That's a must. If you want to be a good writer, you equally have to learn to read.
You have to have prose, good prose.
You have to. If
so it's better to encourage and to challenge you that if you want to excel in this thing, you must have this. You must have what it takes.
These are the criteria that the judges are looking at. Because we want to encourage our public, the public needs to also be impressed with what the media and press are doing. Yeah. They should be impressed with it. And but it's not just because I'm a low reader. So I saw Cham's publication in the Standard. Oh, this is very good. I like this. Because I like it doesn't make it good, and doesn't make it fit for an award also.
And to add on that, we are looking at, you mentioned presentation, because this is one of the key things we are looking at, because whether it's radio, whether it's TV, whether it's newspaper, you have to have the presentation style. How do you present the news there to be appetizing, or your article to be appetizing to the public? We are looking at that, the relevance of the story, the impact, the originality, because also we have some people who will go and plagiarize people's work and everything.
Yes.
So those are some of the key things the judges will be looking at this year, which is very, very important.
Before you wrap it up, Mustafa.
Where is it happening?
I know why he asked for that, because so much food for thought has been put into this. But the kind of food that he's definitely.
No, we hear the whispers.
That's why he's asking for the venue.
The venue is Labranda Hotel, former Sheraton. And we are not going to apologize for that.
People quarrel now.
It's called Labranda.
My goodness, 3 times now.
Yeah,
Sheraton, Coral,
Labranda.
Whatever the name is good for.
Do you have local partners, as in sort of, because if you look at, say for instance, say the regional one, the one that done by Media Foundation, they will have each of the categories. They will have sponsors from banks, from foreign institutions and stuff like that. Do you talk to people like that too?
Yeah, that's something we are working on this year. Maybe Musa can add more on that, but this year we actually want all the categories to be sponsored, because then it will even make it more more motivating for the people, so that also people can have bigger prizes. I know Musa didn't want to talk about the monetary value at the beginning, but
He raised the point that people want to be related to the areas, their areas of activity. For example, I saw a bank CEO who came to me and said he doesn't have we don't have a business column like we do in Nigeria and other places. And we had to explain that it's a big business over there. A lot of market news and etc. So we do our best. Recruiter columnists will give us market and some of the news. But it's that guy like that, when if he sees a column like that, he will go into to buy it. So,
Chair, what exactly is happening this year is the very approach that the committee is taking. All the categories in the award have been identified, have been sold to businesses or institutions that are or could be directly identified with the category. So we're encouraging all those institutions. They've all been written to. For some of them have really come forward, and which is a very big plus. And progress is being made. We're just waiting on. We're not waiting. Hopefully, in the next couple of days, we'll start. Following up, because we want to close the chapter of partnership, identifying, so that we can give them the fitting publicity that we promised them, and identifying them with the award. 1 month before the July 12th event itself. So hopefully, as we set out, all the categories will be identified. Whether it's the bank, whether it's the tourism industry, whether it's GT board, whether it's you name it. All these institutions, we want them to see them come together and identify themselves with technology, with energy, with petroleum, with tourism, with all the categories. Hopefully, from that, then we will be able to definitely say that we can give a monetary prize to the categories or the various winners.
So, in terms of personality, who is not qualified to apply? Say, for instance, former president, Gambia Press Union, Emil, is a journalist. Current president, Gambia Press Union, is a journalist. Is there any such thing to say, oh, this person is conflicted, he will not be able to apply?
Well, for example, I'm a journalist, but I can apply.
The program officer, Lamin Jada, is a journalist.
Yes, because he's working at the secretariat, so he can apply. Like, those are the secretariat for us, the secretariat staff, because we are working with the award committee, so we can apply, because at least we know the day-to-days of what's going on. And they are passionate, even though, to be fair to them, they don't have a say, like Jahad and Seko and all those others are not in the committee. I'm the only one in the committee. At least I'm working directly with Musa. They don't have any influence or say over the award. But to be fair, they can apply, and I can apply. That's one thing I have complained about a long time ago.
You cannot apply.
I cannot apply because I can't.
If you have to say can't, or cannot.
Sean, this is not a language class.
So here is a Kianga trying to teach us Queen's language.
So that's okay. I think
cannot contracting.
System balance before we get a knock on the door.
Okay, I think that's it. If you guys have no question before we wrap it up.
I think they basically said almost everything. Do you have any other thing to?
This is just something we all can just look forward to, and I think the public out there, and of course the members of the active, practicing journalists in the country needs to look up to this thing and make themselves known to what they're doing, because awards all over are there for the winners. It is about boosting your stand, boosting your morals, encouraging you. To really be, as Lamin Cham alluded to, when was the last time? When then awards were even nowhere to be seen or heard. But it's something that lives and stays with you forever. And anyone, I remember during the global AIPS award that was held some time ago in Lausanne, the entire world, in sports press of the world, took part in it. And we are very fortunate to have 2 submissions. I think more than 2 submissions from the Gambia. And they were shortlisted to the 2nd round, which really is very impressive for me as president of the sports press, and having these 2 submissions going at that level, at global level. And this is what we're encouraging. And I like to say this thing: if you don't test yourself amongst the best, you are nowhere. Simple.
That's right. Thank you very much. Well, that was Musa Sissedea, Chairman of the Journalism Awards Committee, and of course Hadija Jawara from the Gambia Press Union. This now brings us to the end of this episode of The Brunch. Join us next week if you can. Thank you very much for watching, and bye.
Dreaming of owning a property in a prime location with great proximity and fantastic neighborhood? EJ Investments Sanyang Seaview Estate is the best choice you have been waiting for. Our Sanyang Seaview Estate is approximately 15 minutes drive away from the busy hub of Brusubi roundabout and into the heart of nature, where you can have a peaceful and relaxed lifestyle with your family. You can buy a finished 4-bedroom story with 5-year flexible payment plan, or a service plot with 2-year payment plan option. With over 300 homes, you will enjoy big tar roads with covered drainage, modern electrification with solar street lights, gated entrance with security post, and a breath-catching experience of our beautiful sea view and lake view. You can own a home today at our Sanyang Seaview Estate. Call us today on 446-4838 or 325-9220. Visit our website on ejinvestments.net. EJ Investments, first in property.